Hello. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my privilege as a white, English-speaking, educated woman. The burden I am carrying is immense, but it is nothing compared with so many who are in crisis. It's coming up to 4 years ago now that a comment a friend made led me to Google what ADHD looks like in girls. As I started to read, I can't even explain the torrent of emotions that I felt: relief, shock, disbelief, and devastation for the little girl who had slipped through the system. Dear me. And the amount of suffering this caused. At this point, I was the solo parent of a 5-year-old boy who I had found out a year prior is autistic and has dyspraxia. His ADHD diagnosis came later. You see, many women like me with ADHD are the primary carers of kids with a range of learning disabilities and neurological disorders. I'll just gather myself for a moment. Though life is tough in a way that only primary carers of kids with complex needs can begin to understand, this is only one small part of the challenges we're facing. By the time I had my son, I'd experienced all manner of challenges that are not for the faint-hearted, as the saying goes. Terrible mental health, despair and self-loathing was the norm for me on and off for more than 20 years of my life. An unwanted pregnancy, substance abuse, and inability to form lasting, intimate relationships. So this is why I parent my son solo. Suddenly, I could make sense of all of this because the majority of women and girls with ADHD can share a similar story. But I'd attended a ton of therapy and done pretty well to get and stay back on track after a lot of harrowing experiences. Nonetheless, despite being very bright and driven, I just missed a bit, sorry. No, I didn't. All good. Nonetheless, despite being very bright, driven, and to the outside world seemingly very capable for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, life was still full of countless challenges, and I couldn't seem to get ahead no matter how hard I had tried. In hindsight, it shocks me that I didn't know the first thing about ADHD, really. I'd spent many years in paediatric nursing and managed to complete a Master's of Public Health that focused on child health. And yet, like most of the population, when I heard the term ADHD, I had an image in my mind of hyperactive 6-year-old boys. And the name this complex condition has been given essentially only represents the most evident, objectively measurable symptoms in 6-year-old boys. And as such, it does untold harm, as most healthcare professionals, teachers, and of course the general public still think of it in these terms. And women and girls with ADHD have endured untold suffering because we usually don't fit the bill. As I was about to find out, ADHD is so much more than this. This is the first sentence that got me. It's common for girls to get through primary school without much obvious difficulty, but in secondary school, their struggles often become more apparent. Their reports are likely to read, talks too much, makes careless mistakes, doesn't perform to her ability. When you're told you're super bright all your life and you can't seem to get things right, it's totally demoralizing. When I told a friend who was a psychiatric registrar at a major Melbourne hospital, I thought I might have ADHD, she replied, I don't know anything about it. We haven't learnt about it at all. Like any self-respecting person with ADHD, I, of course, then used my strength in hyperfocus to devour information about it. And as I had after, I was swamped with the tsunami of info about autism 12 months prior. I quickly learnt that the info I got from autistic people about how to meet my son's needs was far more helpful than any advice from healthcare professionals. That's not to say that they're not helpful at all, but there's no denying that the combination of expertise and lived experience can't be beaten. Long story short, my 30 plus years my 30 plus years in health and research, and then health coaching for a health insurance company for a number of years, made ADHD coaching the next logical step for my career. Excuse me. After slipping through the cracks for most of our lives, once we finally discover the truth, there are a few people ready to greet us and give us what we need. This search and the pain of going alone often compounds our suffering. After nearly 3 years of coaching mainly women with ADHD, this is what I see day after day. The burden we are carrying is immense, especially when we are mothers. We are trying to manage caring for our families, managing our homes, earning a living, kids who are also autistic, dyslexic, etc., because ADHD nearly always is accompanied by other challenges. And their needs are more often than not being met, especially at school. And so they develop mental health disorders, our own mental health issues in a system that is broken. We are managing chronic health issues. The research is coming out finally about the array of conditions we're much more likely to have, many of which are not taken seriously, or at least that completely stump most doctors. We're also often caring for family members with severe mental health issues because we know that untreated ADHD means that those conditions are more likely, such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and elderly parents as well. And we're doing all this while having sometimes debilitating cognitive challenges ourselves, because our condition from sometime in our 30s usually is profoundly worsened due to perimenopause. Not only that, it renders ADHD treatment much, much less effective. Though the reality is we have no idea how much our hormones impact ADHD. We know it's a lot. And that's throughout life, not just in perimenopause. And we don't know how much, and we don't know how much it affects treatment because there is essentially zero research about it. It might be a little bit coming, but nothing you can draw much conclusion from. Despite all of this, there is no help available to us. And I mean practical support. Of course, there are some people who can access diagnosis and treatment, but that's it. And we've heard enough about, I'm sure you're hearing enough about all of that. But we can't work full time. Our careers are often decimated. Our chance at financial independence or even security is often destroyed. And we are resilient, but there is a limit. So we are also almost,
1 minute left.
Okay. So what do we need? We need help. The logic behind support not being available through the NDIS for people with ADHD as their primary diagnosis, as I understand it, because there's good treatment, is completely flawed. Because a huge proportion of people can't get treatment, and those that can are not necessarily getting good treatment at all. In my coaching, I would say 80% of people haven't been properly through. That's in my coaching. It's a particular group whose symptoms are really bothering them, but they haven't been through a proper titration process. My executive functioning problems are severe. I have 20 to 30 strategies in place every day to help me function, and that's just to keep my head above water and safe. Now, I know most submissions are going to address the health and education side of things. I would like to talk about primary caregivers who have cognitive disabilities. We need help managing. We need help with our kids so we can work enough. We need help with small businesses that are flexible and enable us to have financial independence. We need support to do training and study so that we can combine our lived experience with expertise, because this is what helps us most. We need subsidised financial counselling, advice and accounting services, because when our cognitive challenges are profound, without this support, we will have grave difficulty. Okay, now I want to just finish with a meme that does the rounds. Just because I carry it well, it doesn't mean it's not heavy. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you for your evidence. It's very powerful and moving. Okay.